No one believed the dog. Not the grieving family, not the neighbors, not even the doctor who signed the papers. Everyone thought Brian, the loyal golden retriever, was just mourning his owner. But if they knew what Brian knew, if they had listened just a little earlier, the truth inside that coffin would have shaken them to their core. Because as the dog barked, growled, and clawed at the wooden box, something impossible was happening beneath the lid, something that would turn sorrow into shock and despair into a miracle. This was the day a dog refused to let a man be buried alive. The family stood in heavy silence, drained from hours of crying. They believed the young officer inside the coffin was gone forever, but Brian refused to accept it. Each time someone tried to pull Brian away, he resisted with all his strength, whining, twisting, even planting himself in front of the coffin like a fearless guardian. At first, they assumed he was grieving, but then his barking changed, louder, sharper, urgent. It wasn't sadness, it was a warning. Neighbors gathered by the doorway, whispering and exchanging worried looks. Why was this dog so frantic? What was he trying to say? Even then, no one believed him. They begged the dog to calm down, to accept the painful reality. But Brian wouldn't move an inch. He was protecting something inside that coffin. Then suddenly, Brian stopped barking. He slowly placed his ear on the coffin, listening, and what he heard in that moment would make everyone freeze and force them to open the coffin. The room fell silent as Brian pressed his ear against the coffin. His tail stopped moving, his breathing slowed, and his entire body stiffened. Something inside that white wooden box had caught his attention, something no human could sense. A few family members exchanged nervous glances. The barking had stopped, but the silence felt heavier than before. Something about the dog's behavior made a few of them step closer, unsure and afraid. One of the older men whispered that perhaps the dog sensed the soul of his owner. Another shook his head, insisting it was just grief. But Brian's staring was too focused, too precise to be confusion. Then Brian did something none of them expected. He nudged the coffin, gently at first, then harder, as if insisting someone inside needed to be reached. A soft gasp filled the room. One woman swore she heard a faint sound, too soft to be certain, yet too real to ignore. The tension grew thicker, fear mixing with hope. Another man leaned down and placed his hand on the coffin. He held his breath, waiting, listening, searching for anything that might prove the dog wasn't acting out of blind loyalty. And then it happened, just for a split second, a faint vibration beneath the lid, not enough to declare a miracle, but enough to make every person in that room step back in disbelief. The faint shift frightened everyone. Some stepped back, others leaned in, unsure whether what they felt was real or just their imagination. But Brian knew. He stood stiff, tail straight, eyes locked on the coffin, waiting. A low murmur filled the room. A few people whispered prayers. Others crossed their arms, afraid to believe what they had just witnessed. The air felt heavier, charged with something impossible. Then another tiny sound came, so faint that only the people closest to the coffin heard it. A soft thump, like someone trying to reach the surface from underwater. One of the younger men pressed his ear to the lid. His face went pale, his hands shook. He whispered that he heard movement, real movement. A ripple of disbelief spread across the room. Could the officer truly be alive? How was that possible? Questions collided with fear, hope, and panic all at once. Someone suggested opening the coffin immediately. Another warned it might be dangerous. The room divided, half afraid of the truth, half desperate to see it. But before they could decide, the coffin moved again, this time stronger. A clear, unmistakable knock from inside. Gasps erupted, fear turned to terror, and hope turned to certainty. A sudden knock from inside the coffin sent a chill through the room. Faces changed from grief to confusion in an instant. Something impossible had just happened, and now no one could pretend otherwise. Whispers spread like wildfire as people debated what to do. Fear warred with hope. Every second felt like an hour while the dog remained glued to the coffin, refusing to leave. One older man stepped forward, hands shaking as he reached for the lid. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The choice to open it felt like crossing into the unknown. As they prepared to lift the lid, some clung to prayer and others to logic. The tension snapped like wire. Everyone felt the urgency that Brian had been trying to convey from the start. They lifted the lid slowly, each inch an eternity. No one expected what came next. A fragile sound, a breath, a life that had been overlooked in their rush to mourn. Chaos followed, shrieks, prayers, and hands scrambling to help. Someone shouted for a doctor while others cradled the man's head, realizing how close they had come to burying him alive. Brian barked and licked at the man's face as help arrived. What began as grief turned into frantic relief, a miracle born of instinct, and a reminder that sometimes the truth doesn't arrive on time unless someone refuses to walk away. Panic swept through the room the moment they realized he was still breathing. Everything changed instantly. Every second became precious, and no one could believe how close they came to losing him forever. Someone rushed for water while another checked his pulse with shaking hands. The shock of nearly burying a living man hung thick in the air, heavier than the storm outside. They lifted him gently, afraid that even a wrong touch might make things worse. His faint breaths gave them hope, but also fear that it could stop at any moment. Outside, the storm finally calmed just enough for them to move. The dog stayed glued to his side, refusing to let even a single step separate them. When they reached the car, strangers passing by paused in shock. A man who was moments away from being buried, now fighting for his life again. As the engine roared to life, hope spread through them. They didn't know if he'd survive, but they knew they had to try, and the dog never once looked away from him. With the dog resting its head on his chest and the family whispering desperate prayers, they sped toward the hospital, clinging to the tiny miracle they had just witnessed. When they arrived at the hospital, the doors flew open. No one walked. Everyone ran. They knew they were racing against time, and the dog refused to leave the man's side. Doctors rushed forward the moment they saw him. Their faces changed. Confusion, urgency, disbelief. They had never seen someone nearly buried, yet still clinging to life. As they pushed the stretcher down the hall, the dog tried to keep up, whining softly. It was as if the animal feared losing him a second time. They reached the emergency room, where nurses moved in every direction. Machines beeped, hands moved fast, and the dog scratched at the door, refusing to be separated. The family waited in silence. Every minute felt like an hour, and through it all, the dog sat in front of the ER door, ears up, eyes fixed, heart never leaving the man. Nurses occasionally peeked out, surprised to see the dog unmoving, like a soldier guarding something precious. Some whispered that they had never seen loyalty like that. Hours passed, and finally the ER door opened. A doctor stepped out slowly, and everyone held their breath, including the dog, whose eyes locked onto him as if asking the only question that mattered. The doctor stepped forward slowly, his expression serious. Everyone leaned in, not daring to breathe. Even the dog stood completely still, waiting for the truth. Then the doctor finally spoke, his voice gentle but filled with awe. "He's alive, and he's stable. If you had waited any longer, he wouldn't have made it." Gasps filled the room. Some cried openly, others covered their mouths in disbelief. But the dog simply inched closer, as if confirming everything it already knew. They were finally allowed inside the room, and there he lay, weak, breathing slowly, but alive. His chest rose and fell like a gift they thought they had lost forever. When the dog climbed closer, the man's fingers twitched, slow, weak, but real, a tiny sign that his spirit still recognized the friend who refused to give up on him. Doctors called it a miracle. The family called it faith. But everyone agreed on one thing. None of this would have happened without the dog's unshakable loyalty. And as the sun set outside the hospital windows, the dog curled up beside the man, finally at peace, knowing the miracle it fought for had come true. A dog saved a life, simply because love never gives up. If you believe dogs are more than pets, but true angels in disguise, please comment, and subscribe for more incredible animal stories. Your support helps us bring more life-changing moments to the world.